أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يعصهما فإنه لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي زدني علما سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. My dear audiences, friends, brothers and sisters, and those who are watching through Facebook, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is a great pleasure for me to attend this Tafsirul Mahfil, and at the very beginning, I would like to express my deep gratitude to only one creator of everything, Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by saying Alhamdulillah, all praises are for Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, in today's Tafsirul Mahfil, we shall have a discussion on verse number 46 from Suratu Bani Israel. Suratu Bani Israel is surah number 17, and we shall find this surah in part number 15 from the Holy Qur'an. So inshallah, as usual, at first we shall go to the recitation as well as meaning of this verse, of this ayat number 46, and then inshallah we shall go to the elaborate discussion. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجعلنا على قلوبهم أكنة أن يفقهوه وفي آذانهم وقرا وإذا ذكرت ربك في القرآن وحده ولوا على أدبارهم نفورا صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك. I seek refuge, I seek shelter to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the accursed shaitan, from the accursed devil, and I am beginning with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is most merciful, most beneficent. وَجَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً, and I have placed a cover, a curtain over their hearts. أَيَّفْقَوْهُ, so they cannot understand. وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا, and I have also placed deafness in their hearing, in their ears. وَإِذَا ذَكَرْتَ رَبَّكَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ وَحْدَهُ, whenever the oneness of your Creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned through Holy Qur'an, وَاللَّهُ عَلَىٰ أَدْبَارِهِمْ نُفُورًا, they show their back and flee. Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said the truth, and His prophets and messengers have also said the truth, and we are among the witnesses. All praises are for Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All praises are for Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the greatest. So this was the recitation as well as meaning of verse number 46 from Suratu Bani Israel. This Suratu Bani Israel was revealed upon our Prophet during his prophetic life in Makkah. As we know, the prophetic life of our beloved Prophet is divided in two parts. Total prophetic life was 23 years. First 13 years was in Makkah, and rest of the 10 years was in Medina. This Surah Bani Israel was revealed during the prophetic life of our beloved Prophet in Makkah. And as we know, the inhabitants of Makkah used to worship idols and images since long ago, since their fathers and forefathers. And at that time, at the order of our only one Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our beloved Prophet invited the inhabitants of Makkah towards the oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our beloved Prophet invited them. Our beloved Prophet told them that our Creator, your Creator, Creator of everything is only one, and He is Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as we know, the inhabitants of Makkah, the members of Quraysh, used to worship idols and images, innumerous idols and images, countless idols and images. And for that reason, they were not accepting the invitation of Tawheed, invitation of oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, given by our beloved Prophet. And our beloved Prophet became sometime disappointed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed this surah, and through this verse, through this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him why the members of Quraysh, why the inhabitants of Makkah are not accepting the invitation of Tawheed. Why they are not accepting? Because they are being involved in making partners with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we know, making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most heinous offense, is the most heinous sin. And in verse number 48 from Suratu Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala categorically stated that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive all the sins except the sin of making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In verse number 48, Suratu Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ وَمَن يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدِ افْتَرَىٰ إِثْمًا عَظِيمًا. Obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forgive the sin, forgive the offense of making partner with Him. Otherwise, if He desires, He may forgive any other offense, any other sin. And if a person makes partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is involving himself, he is implicating himself in a great sin. So, the members of Quraysh, the members of the inhabitants of Makkah were not accepting the invitation of Tawheed given by our beloved Prophet, and our beloved Prophet sometimes became disappointed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by revealing this verse, encouraging, narrating why they are not accepting Islam, why they are not accepting the invitation of Tawheed. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَجَعَلْنَا عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً, and I have placed a cover, a bar, a barrier over their hearts. أَيَّفْقَهُوهُ, how they will understand, how they will accept the invitation of Tawheed, because I have placed a cover, I have placed a curtain, I have placed a bar over their hearts. And for that reason, they cannot understand the invitation of Tawheed. وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا, and moreover, I have placed deafness in their hearings, in their ears, so they cannot hear the invitation of Tawheed. And whenever our beloved Prophet asked the members of Quraysh, asked the inhabitants of Quraysh, inhabitants of Makkah, towards the shadow, towards the shelter, under the umbrella of Tawheed, they used to show their backside and flee. وَإِذَا ذَكَرْتَ رَبَّكَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ وَحْدَهُ. As you know, the main teachings of Islam is oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam is the only one actual religion in the world, only acceptable religion in the world, Islam. And the main theme, main teachings of Islam is oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So wherever our beloved Prophet asked them to come under the umbrella of Tawheed, to come under the shelter of Tawheed, telling them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our only one creator, Allahu Rabbuna wa Rabbukum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also our creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also your creator, creator of you, mine, and everything is only one, and He is Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our beloved Prophet used to invite them towards the Tawheed, towards the oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by reciting verses, ayat of Holy Qur'an. And whenever our beloved Prophet used to ask them to come under the shelter of Tawheed, under the shelter of oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they used to show their backside and flee and run away. That means the non-believers of Islam cannot embrace Islam because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed cover in their hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a barrier in their hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given deafness in their hearings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given blindness in their eyesight. And for these reasons, they are not coming under the shelter of Tawheed, under the umbrella of Islam. Now inshallah, we shall go with some other relevant verses from the Holy Qur'an. Those are relevant in today's tafsir. At first, earlier I mentioned verse number 48 from Suratu Nisa, relevant in today's tafsir. Now, verse number 18 from Suratul Baqarah. Here Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Summum بكم عمي فهم لا يرجعون. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has considered the non-believers of Islam as the deaf, dumb and blind, and they will not accept Islam. That means those people who have not yet come under the shelter of Tawheed, under the umbrella of Islam, they have been termed as deaf. Deaf means those who cannot hear. They have been compared with dumb who cannot speak, and they have been compared with the blind men who cannot see anything. So the non-believers of Islam are deaf, dumb and blind. Why deaf? They are deaf because they cannot hear the invitation of Tawheed. Actual invitation are not heard by them, and for that reason they have been compared with deaf, and they have been compared with dumb, a man who cannot speak, because they are not expressing oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by their mouth, by their heart. And for this reason they have been compared with dumb, a man who cannot speak. And lastly, they have been compared with a blind man, as a blind man cannot see anything of the world, and a blind man does not know what is good or what is bad, which one is right, which one is wrong. We cannot see, and for that reason he cannot determine the right or wrong. He cannot determine the right way. And the non-believers of Islam have been compared by Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a blind, because they are not coming under the shelter of Islam, under the shelter of invitation of Tawheed, under the oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was verse number 18 from Suratu Baqarah, relevant in today's tafsir. Next relevant verse in today's tafsir is verse number 163 from Suratu Baqarah. In verse number 163, Suratu Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهُ وَاحِدٌ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الرَّحْمَنُ الرَّحِيمُ. In verse number 163, Suratu Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clearly declaring, وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهُ وَاحِدٌ. Your creator is only one, and he is Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La ilaha illahu. And there is no God, there is no creator but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. War-Rahmanur Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most merciful, most beneficent. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our only one creator. He has no partner, he has no son, he has no daughter, he has no wife. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the fault of having any partner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the fault of having son. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the fault of having daughter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the fault of having wife. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the fault of meeting death. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the fault of taking birth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has neither born nor he will die. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is eternal. So this was verse number 163 from Suratul Baqarah. We used to sleep. If we do not sleep, we cannot work on the following day. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the fault of becoming tired. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never becomes tired. Next relevant verse in today's tafsir is verse number 6 from Suratu Ali Imran. In verse number 6, Suratu Ali Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَالَّذِي يُسَوِّرُكُمْ فِي الْأَرْحَامِ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in verse number 6 from Suratu Ali Imran that whenever you are in the womb of your mother, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the shape as He wishes, as He desires. And there is no creator but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most powerful, wisest. That means being a Muslim, we shall have to have belief that if a child comes in the arms of a mother, it is at the order of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without permission, without order of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no women can be pregnant. It is the mercy of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives children in the womb of a mother. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the shape as He desires. Gives the shape means whether he will be male or female, whether he will be good or bad. Everything is under the hand of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is under the control of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Next relevant verse in today's tafsir is verse number 18 from Suratu Ali Imran. In verse number 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Suratu Ali Imran, Shahidallahu annahu la ilaha illahu wal malaikatu wa ulul ilmi qaiman bil qisti la ilaha illahu wal azizul hakim. Shahidallahu annahu la ilaha illahu. Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bearing witness that there is no creator but Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And moreover, the angels, the scholars also bear witness that Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is only one creator. He does not have any partner. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based on justice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never does injustice to anyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives equal treatment to everyone. So this was verse number 18 from Suratu Ali Imran. Here Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave testimony of His oneness Himself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also narrated that not only Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving testimony of His oneness, moreover, the angels, the scholars of Islam, the wise people also are giving the testimony of oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was verse number 18 from Suratu Ali Imran. Next relevant verse in today's tafsir is verse number 64 from Suratul Araf. In verse number 64, Suratul Araf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَأَنْجَيْنَاهُ وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ فِي الْفُلْكِ وَأَغْرَقْنَا الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمًا عَمِينَ. This verse is regarding the community of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. As we know, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam was sent by Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove the partners made with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the world. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam is the first prophet who was sent to remove the shirk from this world, to remove the partners, those were made by the community of Nuh alayhi salam with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The community of Nuh alayhi salam used to worship the idols and images. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Nuh alayhi salam to invite them towards the invitation of Tawheed, towards the invitation of oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we know, while Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam was at the age of 40, he was made prophet. He became prophet at the age of 40. And Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam invited his community towards the teachings of Islam towards the oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 9,050 years. 950 years. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam invited his community towards the Tawheed for 950 years. But unfortunately, only 72 or at best 82 members accepted his invitation of Tawheed. And whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam that his community will not accept the invitation of Tawheed, then Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam made some prayer to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to destroy his community. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed his community except those who ascended, who got on the boat made by Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. That means by giving a flood all over the world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala drowned all the community of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam except those who were on the boat with Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَأَنْجَيْنَاهُ وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ فِي الْفُلْكِ وَأَغْرَقْنَا الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. The members of community of Nuh alayhi salam, they were drowned except those who got on the boat. And his community was destroyed by means of flood because they denied the invitation of Tawheed. Innahum kanu qawman amin. And here I have selected this verse because in the last portion of this verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Innahum kanu qawman amin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compared the non-believers of Islam with blind. Since a blind man cannot see anything, the non-believers of Islam are blind because they are not accepting the invitation of Tawheed. So this was verse number 64 from Suratu Araf, relevant in today's tafsir. Next relevant verse is verse number 101 from Suratu Araf. In verse number 101, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Tilka Qur'an nakussu alayka min ambaiha walaqad ja'atuhum rasuluhum bil bayyinat fama kanu liyu'minu bima kazzabu min qabl kazalika yatba'u Allahu ala qulubil kafirin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, earlier you visit the whole world and see many communities were destroyed because of denying to accept the invitation of Tawheed. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, those who used to deny the invitation of Tawheed, those who are non-believers of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I seal up their hearts. Their heart is sealed up, so they can never return under the shelter of Islam, under the shelter of Tawheed. So sometimes we see that the members of non-believers, although they are seeing many proof of Islam, but they do not accept. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sealed up their hearts. Their hearts have been sealed up because of their wrongdoing, because of their ill doing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sealed up their heart. Next relevant verse in today's tafsir is verse number 31, Suratu Tawbah. Here Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله المسيح ابن مريم. The Christians used to consider their priest as their creator. Nauzubillahi min zalik. And the Jews, members of Jews, used to consider their scholars, religious scholar as their God. And they are considering their priest, scholars as God, as creator, in place of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nauzubillahi min zalik. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also saying that a group of Christians, they used to consider Masih ibn Maryam, Isa ibn Maryam, as their creator. Nauzubillahi min zalik. That means Christians are associating partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, considering Isa ibn Maryam as their creator. Nauzubillahi min zalik. A group of other Christians, they used to consider their priest, scholars of their religion, as their creator. Nauzubillahi min zalik. A group of Jews consider Hazrat Uzair alayhi salam as the son of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nauzubillahi min zalik. They are making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a group of Jews consider their scholars of their religion as their creator. And by doing this, they are making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in another part of this verse, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. But they were directed, they were asked to worship only for one creator, for Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for no one else. La ilaha illahu. And they were directed to worship only for Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who does not have any partner. Subhanahu amma yushrikun. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the fault of having any partners. From the fault of having any partner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free. So this was verse number 31 from Surah Tawbah. Through this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has narrated the ill activities of Christians, ill activities of the Jews, how they are making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Next relevant verse in today's tafsir is verse number 44 from Surah Ar-Rum. Surah Ar-Rum, verse number 44, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Man kafara fa alayhi kufruhu wa man amila salihan fali anfusihim yamhadun. Those among us who have accepted Islam, we have accepted Islam, we have come under the shelter of Tawheed, we have come under the shelter of oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our own benefit. If we do good things, good deeds, it is for our own. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be beneficiary of our accepting Islam. On the other hand, if a non-believers reject, if the non-believers reject the invitation of Tawheed, they are rejecting for themselves. By rejecting invitation of Tawheed, they cannot make any damage, any loss to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Man kafara fa alayhi kufruhu. Whoever reject Islam, he is rejecting for himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not face any loss for your non-accepting Islam. Since you are not accepting Islam, you will face loss for yourself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not face any loss. Being a Muslim, we shall have to have belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not dependent to anyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our only one creator. And all the creatures are dependent on Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not dependent to any creature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not dependent to anyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is self-sufficient. Whenever He wants to create anything, He used to say, be and it is. Kun fayakun. So, the non-believers of Islam, they should not think that by rejecting Islam, they are making any loss to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are making loss to themselves. And those who have accepted Islam, they are becoming beneficiary for themselves. If we accept Islam, we shall be benefited ourselves. And if we reject Islam, we shall face loss ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be benefited or loser for our accepting or rejecting Islam. Next relevant verse in today's tafsir is verse number 9 from Suratu Yasin. Verse number 9 in Suratu Yasin, surah number 36 from the Holy Qur'an. Here Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ سَدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سَدًّا فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. The non-believers of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that I created barrier, cover, bar behind them, in front of them, and I have placed covers, and fahum la yubsirun, they cannot see. That means since a blind man cannot see anything because of not having eyesight, and a non-believers of Islam, he is not accepting Islam because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed a cover in their eyes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed barrier in their front, in their backside. And for that reason, they are not in a position to accept the invitation of Tawheed, to accept the oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, the non-believers of Islam, they are rejecting Islam because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed barriers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed cover before them, behind them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed cover in their eyesight. For that reason, they cannot see the actual thing. And for that reason, they are not coming under the shelter of Islam, under the umbrella of oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now inshallah we shall go with some relevant hadith in today's tafsir. First hadith, the utterances of our beloved Prophet, the sayings of our beloved Prophet. An Abi Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الإسلام أن تعبد الله ولا تشرك به رواه البخاري. This hadith has been narrated by Hazrat Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu, the famous companion of Islam, the famous companion of our beloved Prophet, Hazrat Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu. He said that our beloved Prophet has said, Islam means you will worship only for Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will not make any partner with Him. Rawahul Bukhari. As I earlier said, the main teachings of Islam is Tawheed. Main teachings of Islam is oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is only our only one creator. He does not have any partner. Next hadith is An Jabir radhiyallahu anhu قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من مات يشرك بالله شيئا دخل النار وَمَنْ مَاتَ لَا يُشْرِكُ بِاللَّهِ شَيْئًا دَخَلَ الْجَنَّةَ رواه Muslim. This hadith has been narrated by Hazrat Jabir radiallahu anhu. He said, our beloved Prophet has said, whoever dies making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will be thrown in the hell, in the hellfire. And those who die without making any partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will enter in Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will admit him in Jannah, in heaven. Rawahu Muslim. That means precondition to become successful in the life of hereafter is believing on only one creator, and he is Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And believing that our beloved Prophet, our only one creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have any partner. That means we must bring Iman on the oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Next relevant hadith is An Abi Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu anna Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam qala ijtanibu al-mubiqat ash-shirku billahi was-sihru. Rawahu al-Bukhari. This hadith has been narrated by Hazrat Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu. He said, our beloved Prophet asked us, avoid two things. First, avoid making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means never make any partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And avoid magic. Rawahu al-Bukhari. That means making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a heinous sin, and our beloved Prophet has directed us to restrain from making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he has also asked us to restrain magic. Next relevant hadith is An Shaddad ibn Ausin radhiyallahu anhu qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam man salla yura'i faqad ashrak, man sama yura'i faqad ashrak, man tasaddaqa yura'i faqad ashrak. Rawahu Ahmad. Now this hadith is regarding the believers of Islam. As we know, making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means doing shirk. But if a Muslim, after accepting Islam, if man salla yurai, if anyone offers prayer to show people, it means he is making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Man soma yurai, if anyone keep fasting to show people, that means he is making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Man tasaddaqa yurai faqad ashrak, who spend money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show people, to make show off, it means he is making partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means offering prayers to show people, keeping fasting to show people, spending money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show people, amounts to make partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rawahu Ahmad. So, through this hadith, we must keep in our mind that we shall make good deeds only for the satisfaction of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the satisfaction of anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we do any good things, if we do any good thing to show people, that good things will not come to our any help. Because offering prayer to show people amounts to make partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Keeping fasting to show people amounts to make partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Spending money in the way of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show people, to make show off, amounts to make partner with Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rawahu Ahmad. Next relevant hadith in today's tafsir is An Umar ibn Khattab radhiyallahu anhu qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam al-Islamu an tashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. Rawahu al-Bukhari wa Muslim. This hadith has been narrated by second Khalifa Hazrat Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu. He said, our beloved Prophet has said, Islam means bearing witness that there is no creator but Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also bearing witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his messenger. So, if anyone wants to come under the shelter of Islam, he must bear witness that our only one creator is Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He does not have any partner. And secondly, he must bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last messenger of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If anyone cannot fulfill these two conditions, he cannot come under the shelter of Islam. And for this reason, the Christians, the Jews, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Qadiani, and members of any other religion, they are non-believers of Islam, because they are not giving testimony of these two conditions. So, main theme, main teachings of Islam is Tawheed. And Tawheed means oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And secondly, we shall have to bear witness that our beloved Prophet Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last messenger, last prophet of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed this Holy Qur'an, and this is the last revelation from Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Tawheed is the main teachings. Tawheed is the oneness of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the main teachings of Islam. Now inshallah, we shall offer prayer. Before offering prayer, let us recite Durud. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma amin. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا اللهم من أحييته منا فأحيه على الإسلام ومن توفيته منا فتوفه على الإيمان ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا رب هب لي من الصالحين رب زدني علما أستغفر الله اللهم إني أسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى والله. We, some of your members, some of your servants have been gathered in this Tafsirul Mahfil, and we have discussion from your Holy Qur'an and Sahih Hadith. We have made many mistakes. Please forgive our all mistakes and accept this Tafsirul Mahfil. Oh Allah, forgive our all sins. Oh Allah, you know what is in our heart. Please fulfill our all good desires in our heart. Oh Allah, save the Muslims of the world. Oh Allah, save the Muslims of, especially save the Muslims of Palestine. Oh Allah, save the whole Muslims of the world. Oh Allah, increase our sustenance. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.